Alright, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I am not a body guy. So we're going to skip over a lot of this stuff just because I'm not the person to be learning from this stuff from. But basically what I got going on here is I started with a flat sheet like this. This one's for the back side of this rear wheel well. But I started out just with a flat sheet, got it up at there, and eyeballed it. I had some marks at where I thought the bottom of the body needed to be, and where this wheel well opening should be at. To get this, I actually made a template using a piece of cardboard and copied off the other side because basically everything down here was gone off of the side. Well, actually, there. That's it right there. So obviously I didn't have the wheel well opening, so I had to copy off the other side. That worked out alright, and I brought that piece of cardboard over here, and then I started taping it out. And I went both directions with just some painter's tape, and then trim the edges to get this outline, and then I used that as a template to cut my sheet, added a little bit extra all the way around, and then got back over here and kind of just shaped it to fit. Mostly to go through that, what I did was I started out by putting this bend in up here because this is the body line, and I wanted to make sure that that was going to end up in a good spot. Before I did that, I actually started, did the first 3 holes here to put the Cutlass in. Then I put this bend in, put the last one in up here, and from there I bent this edge to give it some strength, because this was the largest flat section. So I wanted to put this bend in there first. I just went to 90 degrees to start to give it some rigidity. Then I had to work on getting this edge rolled over enough where I could keep this bend, because as you try to bend it over, it wanted to flatten out again. Once I had that set, then I went down and I bent this lower edge to give it strength across that way, and this makes the very bottom of the body line, so that was another important part. And once I had that, then it only goes back so far, and then I've got the part where it curves down to make the body seam along the bottom. Of course, at this point, there's nothing left of that, so I'm actually going to have to make another inner rocker piece to support that back here, because otherwise it's going to be doing a whole lot of this. And I'll have to get some more sheet metal to do that, but I just want to try to fix as much of it as possible. As you can see, this part popped right out. Big old solid chunk of body filler there. So I'll be needing to replace a chunk of this rocker as well. Again, this is another good reason to try to replace the section behind it. Moving on to getting this to fit, I then repositioned the piece after I had it shaped the way I wanted. It was laying over the top of the body before I cut all this off. And then I used the Dicam blue and scribed it, and then came back and with cut-off wheel, just got it, left a little, about an 1/8 inch on there all the way around, and then I went around the Cleco portions because I wanted to be able to put it back exactly in the same place, because I've been pulling it on and off and then trimming up to that scribe line to fit. And once I had it very close to the scribe line, then I went to just filing it to fit, and then now there's sections here where I can push it down and it's completely flush in between the Clecos. It ain't perfect the whole way, especially up here because we got more bends going on, and because it's on top of the body and then I'm trying to push it flush, it's not going to work out quite perfect. But once I get a few spots where it is flush started, like for up here for example, my plan is I'll get the very edge here flush, put a tack there, put a couple of tacks along here pulling it flush, but then once I get to here I'm going to have trouble with that because of where the Cleco support still is. So I'll have to get a body saw because I don't have one, so I can kind of take these out, angle it up a little bit, and then be able to saw that seam, or saw that little support out, and then it'll be able to drop in flush, and then I'll just keep putting tacks like every ½ inch or so, and repeat that process all the way down until I've got everything as seamless as I can make it, and then we'll do a full weld all the way across. But like I said, I'm not the person to be learning this from. There's plenty of other sources as far as getting that from guys who actually do body work. My goal here is just to replace this rotted out junk and be able to put a little bit of filler on it if I have to, but I want to try to do as much with metal as I can. And then I just have to have a smooth enough surface so that the car can get wrapped, which is happening like 2 weeks from now. So I've got both quarter panels, front and rear, to do. The passenger side here is by far the worst, and I'm going to have to do this rocker on the passenger side. And then the body has just got holes, either drilled in it or punched in it in several places, and then anywhere else where the paint's kind of messed up, I've been trying to grind it down to metal, or at least feather it out. Like right here, this is a nice feathered edge. I won't have to take the rest of the paint off. We can just wrap over the top of that. So that's my goal. It is a track car, race car, or whatever. It's not a show car. I don't need it to be perfect, but this is the process I'm going through, and I'm very much learning as I go. Alright, I got this panel welded all the way in now, and I also replaced this section of rocker. This wasn't super easy, as I'm sure the camera's picking up. There's some wiggles and bumps and stuff in here. That's from when I welded it. It kind of, you know, like it went from, I had it everything nice and flush when I tacked it, and it was like every quarter inch I had a tack, and everything was fitting really well. But when I went and welded it, that whole section kind of went like this, and it almost like had a quarter inch gap or more. And I was kind of stressing out about how to fix that. And I think part of the problem was that the bottom of the panel was still loose. But what I ended up doing to fix that was I went through a few different tries. Like, I mean, it's almost impossible to hit from the backside with a hammer. Like, I had the inner fender peeled back so that I could try to get in there, and then I was trying to make a tool to like make a planishing hammer that stuck in there, and that wasn't panning out the way I was hoping to get that to work easily. So what I ended up doing was I decided that the panel needed to be stiffer to make it work. So I reattached it all along the bottom, like the body seam here. And actually, to be able to do that before I even put the weld of the panel on or this rocker, I had to replace the inner rocker section. So I got that bent up and put in place. And then I was able to put tack welds along the bottom to stiffen this panel up some more. And then with the bottom stiffened up, I was able to just take my pry bar, use this one actually, and I just ran it in along the back side, and I used a 2x4 for kind of a backer to push off of. And all I did was I reached up in here and I applied pressure and kind of like drug it along the back, and man, it popped out pretty nice. A lot of this stuff is just because I tried to planish it out with a hammer and dolly by that, and it wasn't working because I was hammering that way, when really it would have worked a lot better hammering from the backside, but there's no space back there. So once I had that in place, then I was able to do this rocker section up here. And I had to just, again, took a flat piece of sheet metal, put the bends I wanted in it, got it lined up pretty good, and then weld that in. That went a lot better. And for this one, the rocker, I actually put tacks along the visible face and along the bottom of the seam and along the top gap before I actually started welding a whole lot of it. And that, I mean, it really didn't have anywhere to go at that point because it had so much support all the way around. But at this point, it just might need a little bit of a skim pass of Bondo to kind of cover up some of this stuff and sand down the high spots, and it'll be good enough. Now that I feel a little more confident about this, we'll go through doing the same thing back here to this section. I'm actually going to replace quite a bit of it here. This panel, actually it's going to be the bends that go underneath to go back to the seam as well on the bottom of this. So it's actually going to be sitting, let's see, a mark there, something about like that. I know it's not the greatest to go through the center of this panel. That's why I had so much of the problem on that side, but I also don't want to like go up all the way to this body line where it's just going to be that little bit of a bend there to be supportive and then screw up that body line bend. And really, for this stuff's easier to see because the car's so high up in the air right now. By the time it gets down on the ground, like, this is hardly going to be something that gets noticed a whole lot anyway, unless somebody's really looking at it. But we'll go through this. First thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to get my lines on here where I want my bends. And that's entirely going to be based off of how tall I want the flange on the bottom and how far I have to come out to match up here. So I'm just going to measure those two, and it should add up to about where this dotted line that I put on here is. And same thing, I made this just with putting painter's tape on here to make my layout, and then folded it even underneath to match it up to basically make a template of what that size sheet was, which is how I came up with this. So we're just going to measure those two sections and then put my lines on here and we'll put the bends in, and at that point we'll be pretty much lined up where we'll be ready to mark it out. The easiest way I find for marking these is just use the caliper. So I know I want my first section at, well, I measured 1 inch for the body seam that's down there. I probably don't need all of that, so why don't we short that up to 3/4? That'll give me a little bit more room up on the panel, just in case I was off a little bit. Because, you know, why not have a little extra when you need it? Or even if you don't. So I'll do my first bend line at 3/4 of an inch from the bottom edge. And I can just drag it along here and scribe it with the caliper tip. Then I know I have 1.25 inches for the rest, so I can just set it for 2 inch. And repeat the process. Now I have my 2 bend lines. I suppose you'll think, oh yeah, you got a sheet metal brake because, you know, fancy tool stuff. I don't. I have 2 large pieces of angle iron, and they're not even very nice angle iron at that, but it gets the job done. So I've got my 2 bend lines. I know I need to go put them in opposite directions, and I know that the lower one needs to more or less be parallel to the large surface. I find it easiest to start at one end and work my way across. Since there's only 2 bends, this is really easy to do it one way and then just flip it over. The key thing is being able to see your lines from whichever way you're bending it. I just slide it down inside of the angle iron here, and this bend will be coming towards me. So I know that I need to be looking at the angle iron to the front. The back one's not that big a deal. So I'm just going to line up where I can see my line is visible just above the top of the piece of angle iron. I get the other side situated the same. Trying to maintain a similar gap across there. Looks like the line wasn't completely perfect. probably due to the edge of the material not being perfect. I did cut it out from a larger sheet. But I'm getting my edges lined up, so it might end up a little bit short in the middle, but that'll be fine. Once again, it's just the body seam section. We're not going for any kind of precision down there. So once I got the edges set with the clamps to hold it in place, then I can come back with the vise and tighten it up some more. And now we need to come towards me with this bend. No, I'm just gonna bend it. And once I got it about like this, then I'll come back with the hammer and try to get that to be a nice sharp bend. We're doing a light hits because we don't want to put too much bend in it all the way in one section, or it ends up like twisting it. So a lot of smaller hits is better than one big one. Now I can amp up the pressure now that I'm down and I want to actually make that crease. And got a fairly decent bend on there. So now we'll flip it over. And this bend is going to go away. So in order to set that one up, since I don't have the lines all the way to the edge, I need to make sure that my two pieces of angle iron are level to each other when I'm trying to line it up. You see, this is much more difficult to bend because it's a shorter area, but this bend here that we did the first one also helps add strength. Just don't want to be hitting it too much. Should get a 2x4 on there to help me push. Now once we're to this point, we just got to kind of fight with it and get it down. We can start trying to put something down in here to help hit it across. Maybe this 2x4 will work. There, now we got that edge straightened up a bit. Oh, excuse me. Now we're not too worried about how pretty this is because it's all going to be out of sight. At least I'm not too worried about it. And now I got the start of my patch panel. It's still got twist in it, but it ain't going to bend across. So that's having these bends in there to start with is going to really help control a bit of the warpage, not all of it. But we'll go back over to the car. We'll look at where this lip for the fender opening is going to be and see if we can get that sorted out too. Alright, now the panel is long. We have lots of material over here and material at the back. I made sure, I mean, see where my mark was, where I made sure to leave extra material. This can get trimmed down, or we can actually cut the corner out of here and then make two folds, which will replace this corner back here. and I'll have to remove some of this body plastics or get it pulled out of the way so we don't damage it with heat. But I'm thinking that's probably going to be the way to go. There is a bolt right back in there, so I'll probably need to pull that and check where that bolt is and whether or not it's going to be hit by this or be able to be incorporated or what I want to do there. I think it seems pretty solid, so I think I'll just leave that alone and cut this to be underneath it. But want to put those two corners in because that'll help strengthen the panel up, especially in this corner. But we have plenty of room to trim and fit there. We also have plenty up here. So I just need to pick a spot. So if I line up the seam with my line back there, I've got a lot of material here yet. This opening is fairly straight and noticeable from what's left of the material. So I can actually just kind of trace it on the back. And there's my fold line for the fender opening. So we can get that bent and get this corner figured out down here so we can actually put it up and it'll actually kind of lock in place. And then at that point, once we're happy with the position, we can scribe the panel and cut. But get this done first. Now because this is a pretty sharp corner down here and we're going to be trying to bend it, this isn't going to work out the way it is. However, with the way the material works out, if I slit it, bend this, and then re-weld that seam later on, it should still be plenty strong, and before I put it on the car, I can weld it from both sides and then grind it so that it looks like one seamless piece in that corner. So we'll start with that. Probably should have done this part first, but if we drill a hole there, that might help it as well. Just gives it a little more clearance. Take the burrs off. Now to make this bend, since it's pretty simple, I can just use my vise. It may not be perfectly straight on that fender, but it's darn close. And I can just kind of average it out because it'll be almost impossible to tell from outside the car anyway. And make sure we're bending the correct direction. I want to apply some more pressure across here because I don't want to hit it with the hammer and have a super tight bend, or I'm going to end up putting dimples in that. So I want to try to keep some nice pressure on there because we just want a slightly rolled corner, or a nicely rolled corner. There, we're slightly past 90. Can pull it out. We have a nice rounded corner for going into our wheel well. Then there's this section that's sticking up. We can always finish cutting that off or pull these together and weld them from both sides and then grind off the excess later. I don't know if you can see that, so it's sticking out just a little bit, and I'll leave it like that so I can weld the front side without having to worry about burning through and making it weird, and then do the back side, and then we can grind that and blend it because it won't take a whole lot. But I'll go back and double check the angles, because if this lower needs to bend up a little bit more, like because we only went to 90 degrees with it, it probably needs to be uphill a little bit to match the factory stuff or get a little closer. I'm not so much worried about that at this point. I just want to make sure that seam gets nice and tight. Alright, I just hit it with the MIG quick. I did the back side and then the front side. So I'll just clean this up now. Just gonna hit it with the flapper disc a little bit. There, now we got a nice rounded corner edge. Alright, I pulled the marker light and the tail light so I could get this plastic body section loose so that I can look at where that mounting stud was. There's actually 3 of them back here. Studs up at this height, which looks good and fresh, so actually if I can save this corner, I will. I'll have to strip a little more metal off of that to take a look at it. It's a good chance that I won't be able to, but what's on the back side looks good, so even if I just welding on that corner a little bit and then I can dress it up, or we just cut it back around the corner and I can weld it back there as well. See, our panel goes on here and it's pretty good shape. I got a little bit of a bend here just from welding down there, but that's pretty darn minor, especially because I can still manipulate it around. So I just want to look at how it's fitting. We want to make sure that we're pretty snug up here, and then I can look at where that edge is back here and mark it. As you can see, that corner's not so great as soon as it rounds. So I'm going to try to take that rust section out, so we'll bend the replacement panel to try to reach around that a bit. Alright, so I've added some blue dye to the panel. I trimmed back this edge for the fender well opening. I also folded over the other end for the back here to replace that, and this does happen to, I left enough extra on there to go in far enough to replace the bad spot back there. The angle actually clears the bolt back there as well, so probably try to leave as much of this as possible for welding back there. We can always trim it a little later. It does fit over the panel right now, even with those bends. So basically I'm gonna have a little bit extra on each end from what the panel is. Honestly, it's not gonna make that big of a difference. I'll probably move it so that it's this end that gets cleaned up, because all of this will be cut away. So if it shifts forward a little bit, the only thing I gotta worry about matching up is going to be this little radius up here in the corner, which can certainly be massaged a little bit with the hammer and blended in later. It's also way low on the car. Like I said, a lot of this is just to get rid of what I can't wrap to. Dang it! That's double thick everywhere there. Okay, what am I going to do about that? Ah, dumbass. Alright, I already screwed up. Alright, well. Shit. Alright, well. Alright, well there's a bunch what not to do. I wanted to leave my Cleco hole to hold it up here. And then I shot right past it. I also started trying to cut too close to the line. As you can see, I wanted to leave some and then to like finish fit with the little grinder instead of this bulky 4.5 inch. Shit. Alright, well, whatever. We'll make it work. I'm committed now, so I'll just have to probably have to start with this end for getting everything fit up and slowly work my way back, but we'll see what I can do. Actually, I might be able to use this hole up here now because it was part of the inner fender and it was too thick before. I'll see if I can straighten that hole out. Worth a crap to use. Alright, so I ground the rest of that quarter panel down to the scribe line, and as you can see, we're trying to obtain as tight of a fit as possible. You know, right there we're out a little bit, but with pushing it right in right there, it's flush. That's, I mean, basically you don't even have to put any filler in that weld. And I've tried to do that all the way down, other than the two little spots where those Clecos are still holding on. Some of this is going to pull together with the heat of welding, and I'll have to kind of chase it a little bit. Either by trying to stretch it back out with a hammer and dolly, which is almost impossible because I can't get inside of that quarter panel very well. Although maybe I can reach down from the trunk back here. Yes, actually I can. So hammer and dolly will work. Otherwise, it's a little bit of like file fitting as you go, is what I had to do on the front section. The lip right there, I'm not even bothering to line up right now because I want to wait until I have it welded here, and then it'll be easier to hammer that over without screwing up the front side. So that's pretty minor. We'll worry about that later. So at this point, I need to start putting some tacks on it and just work my way down about, you know, quarter to half an inch at the most between the tacks is my plan. And as I said, sometimes those will pull together with the tack and then they won't be able to line up flush. They'll like hit each other. So it either needs to be filed or hammer and dolly to stretch that weld back out as I go. So I'm working until I got it as flush as I can get it. And then we'll put a tack weld on there. Hopefully it doesn't go anywhere. Not even going to use filler. And sometimes it'll pop out like that because the material in the back or whatever else. So I need to be ready with a little bit of filler rod. I was really hoping for better material than that, but it is what it is. I want to be trying to put as little filler in this whole panel as possible, because apparently the more filler you put in, the more it shrinks. So I'm just gonna kind of keep on going down the row. as you can see, I got a few tacks on there now. But if you look down, all of a sudden I don't have a gap anymore or a tight fit because now it's overlapping down here. So what happened was, as I tacked, it was shrinking and it's twisting the whole thing up. So I need to try a hammer and dolly and stretch this area back out, and then maybe I'll get the fit back down here the way I want. Can't get in there. Took a little finagling there, but I got this part to fit flush again, and I got a little bit of a gap back down here. If it'll focus, yeah, there you go. Now I got a little bit of a gap back here so I can push this in. You know, but I just had to manipulate the panel a little bit. And if you're wondering why I'm not like jumping way down here, I don't exactly know the reason why. I just know I was watching some guys that actually know what the hell they're doing, and this is how they were doing it. Was just going and trying to make sure that they maintain this fit the entire time, because maintaining that fit means that you're not like chasing the panel. Because if I start grinding this panel to make it fit the whole way, now it's going to have like a banana curve on the bottom, or at least it's going to be trying to. And if that's pulling and pushing and distorting this panel in some way, we're going to wind up with a panel that's not straight or flat or shaped the way it's supposed to be. So, but now that I got this spot here flushed up, I can put another tack there. It's a little low, so we're just going to kind of keep chasing it a little bit and go down the whole thing. Just to be clear here, a body saw would be a much better solution than this, but I don't have one, so this is what I'm forced to do. Gotta cut that little flange off. Oy, oy, oy. Great, alright. Well, now I got a little piece left in there. There's probably some nice body files, or like I said, a body saw tool that have a lot shorter stroke than that damn skill saw thing. So now I got kind of a little bit wider gap here. I'll have to put some filler in, but now I can keep straightening it out and keep going and try to make all this as flush as possible. It's not the end of the world, it's what I have to work with. I've got it tacked around this seam right here. You can see there's a little bit of a bow in there, but and I've got it welded down the back side here. It didn't end up perfectly flush, but I mean, I don't think it's anything anybody's ever gonna see. I mean, it's only a freaking inch and a half to the bottom of the car, and it's like a 30-second off. Remember this lip we were talking about? That's lining up pretty darn good right there. So I put a little bit of filler weld around that there. We'll be able to blend that out, no problem. Now, what I'm gonna do different than I did on the front was, it was at this stage that I just decided to weld the front. I didn't even have the clamps on the bottom. So I think that's part of what made the suck-in problem that I had, where it sank this whole seam. So I'm gonna take these clamps off, and I'm gonna see where I can drill several spot weld holes for the bottom, for the body seam. and zap those with the wire feed just to get them filled in before I come back and I TIG this whole stretch. Alright, this is after welding. It seems that having it anchored with some spot welds along the bottom makes a big difference, as well as having it both ends welded up ahead of time to minimize the flexing. There is a bit of a bow in there. Yeah, there you can see it. So it's kind of low through here. This spot's out a little bit. This is low again, and this is actually blended out pretty good there. Now, to be able to straighten this out, I mean, I can hammer this back, but then it's going to be low like the rest. But before I do any of that, I want to chase it with the grind wheel. Just this guy. We're just going to blend off all the high spots. I'm going to try to do the same thing to the back. That way, if I'm hitting it with the hammer at all, we're not inducing weird dimples and high-low spots based on where the tops of the weld are, because we want to be trying to hit it and have it smooth on both sides. Alright, well the backside's pretty smooth. That is the nice thing about using the TIG welders. You're trying not to push too much through it. So I'm just gonna probably start with the pry bar again and just kind of push along the seam and see what pops out. Not too bad. So I got a little bit of cleanup it'll need, but damn, it came out really well. There's a few ripples and stuff in it yet, but I don't have a planishing hammer or a good way about getting all those out, but it should be very, very minimal Bondo in order to make a nice smooth surface. Well, that's how I've been going about patching the rust spots. I still have both sides of the quarter to do on the driver's side of the car here, but I'm not going to bother showing you that. I'm going to do it the same way as the other side, except they're even smaller patches, so I won't be nearly such a big section, and it should be a little easier to keep straight. But other than that, I mean, there'll be a few, like there's cars got holes all over the place in it, and I'm finding more and more stuff where the paint's messed up that I'll have to grind down and smooth out in order to get the car wrapped, which is coming up in, just barely over a week from now. So I gotta knock out these two and then start chasing over the rest of the car. I still need to do the roof yet too, because the clear coat's all messed up off the roof. But other than that, I'm waiting on getting my rear end back from powder coating so I can get this car down on its wheels. I gotta pull the engine and transmission out yet. That way I can work on that stuff while it's gone getting wrapped, because that'll take a week or so. And after that, it'll be a mad dash to have it ready for Motorhead Madness down at the deck in Duluth. And yeah, and that's about it. So hope you enjoyed this video. Maybe you learned something. Like I said, I'm not the best person to be learning from on this. A lot of the stuff that I went through as far as figuring out how to do this stuff was watching Make It Custom and Crucible Coachworks. That was really where I saw that, you know, being able to TIG weld it and doing the flush fit up. Otherwise, I've only ever seen where People kind of like put a lap in there and try to make it fit that way, but then you're filling more of a gap, and apparently that makes more warp. So if you want to learn more about doing this kind of stuff, I'd recommend both of those channels. But yeah, I don't know, I didn't know how to do body work 2 weeks ago, and just watching some of those guys' videos and then coming out here and just going for it. But I don't think it's too bad. I mean, obviously my first panel versus my second panel, the second panel has been way better, and hopefully by the time I'm done with the third and the fourth here, it'll be even better than that. So, have a good day.